Good evening, everybody. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. As we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for their stewardship of the land. Welcome to tonight's program to celebrate the release of Supota Under the Moon by Claudia Castro Luna. Yeah. Which is presented in partnership with our friends over at Elliott Bay Book Company. We're grateful to the author series sponsor, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and to the Seattle Times for their generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. I want to give a big hello and welcome to all of our attendees here at Central Library and also watching our live stream. I have just a couple announcements before we get started. We are a couple of months into our in-person programming, and we've got a lot of wonderful events scheduled for June, including events with historian Quintard Taylor, comics artist Alex Graham, entrepreneur Julie Pham, and novelist Otessa Moshfegh. I'm sure that Elliott Bay Books has more information about all of those events at their table. Elliott Bay Books also have copies of Claudia's books. And if you're here with us in person tonight, they have copies on the table to your right. And if you're watching online, you can find books at their website, elliottbaybook.com. And we're also going to drop direct links to her books in the chat on the online for the online audience. I wanted to mention that Claudia is happy to sign your books after the event, and we're requesting that folks stay masked in the signing line. There will a table will appear in front here, kind of in front of the chairs, and we'll ask that the signing line go across the podium. For folks here in person, as I mentioned, if you need to exit the auditorium during the event, you can use that door to your right. And after tonight's conversation and event, there will be time for questions from the audience. Folks here in person can write questions on index cards, and I will pass those out kind of throughout the event, and staff will collect them at the end of the event. And if you're watching online, you can ask your question at any time by writing it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And finally, we're interested in hearing from you. So toward the close of the event, we'll be posting a link to the survey in the chat for the online audience, and we'll collect the paper surveys from folks who are here with us in person. So I am now delighted to introduce Rick Simonson from Elliott Bay Book Company, who is going to talk a little bit more about the shape of tonight's program. Rick.
Thank you, Stesha. Thank you, everyone who is here and also there. At the bookstore at Elliott Bay, we started going back to in-person, and it's still a little different realities to be having the people who are here versus the ones who are there, including, I'll hold up Claudia's book now, but that's also for the screen people. So because of tonight, so there are several things about tonight to say briefly. One, Stesha gave a land acknowledgement, and I think it's apt tonight because of you're going to hear at least two languages here, and because of Claudia's great advocacy and work on other languages, just to say that the language preceding the ones you will hear from tonight is the Coast Salish language of Lushootseed, which is being strengthened as we go. So tonight is occasioned by the publication of Claudia's extraordinary new book, but Claudia Castro Luna being Claudia Castro Luna, it's not the usual kind of a reading where she comes and reads. She will do that, but you are going to hear from others, and you're going to hear not just words, you're going to hear music. And this is very much in keeping with her work over the years. Many of us first heard her really come to Seattle, move here not that long ago, and become quite connected to the community, and in fact being the city of Seattle's first civic poet, and then moving from that to the state and being the state poet laureate twice, both very much in-person role, but also in the virtual role, having to do that as well, learning how to do that as well. So tonight you will hear from others, and you will hear from Claudia, as I say, and you, of course, being Claudia, you also, for those who are here, there are programs, which I had my little notes. I was going to list all what's happening, and I'll still say, that after I'm done doing this little part, you'll hear music. Then you will hear a poet whose name is, you're going to have to almost keep you do need a program because a poet named Claudia Linares is going to read. Then you'll hear from Leticia Hernandez Linares. So we're combining names. I don't think there's a family connection, although El Salvador is part of all three's lineages. And after Leticia reads, and I'll get up a little bit between just to really say a little more about each as we go. Then Claudia will read, then there'll be music, then again, and then you'll hear Claudia and Leticia converse. And that is going to be something not to be overlooked because these two carry on in a good way. The poetry is part of it. And then following that, we'll have book signing and celebratory moments that way. So first, you're going to hear music. And this, again, we are delighted that you're going to hear from Gus Denhard and Abel Rocha, who are going to be performing, and the instruments are there. I'll go ahead and read this for, especially, I'm not sure the people who are not with us in the room have this in front of them. Gus performs on the lute. That's what he'll be playing, among other instruments. And he's a founder of the Eurasia Consort. He's appeared with the Baroque Northwest, the Concord Ensemble, the Chicago Music of the Baroque, and he's the current executive director of the wonderful and vital nonprofit organization, Early Music Seattle. And then Abel, who has Rocha, who is, we've gotten to hear, we were talking a little bit earlier about him here performing at Elliott Bay. He's from Mexico City. He's a folklorist, singer, a multi-instrumentalist who performs music from Mexico, Venezuela, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. He is a foundational member of groups including Correa Aria and Los Flacos, and he is recently the subject of a Channel 9 Seattle Emmy nominated documentary, Los Artistas. So gentlemen, Gus and Abel, please, and please welcome them.
¿Qué haré lejos de ti, prenda del alma? Sin verte, sin oírte, sin hablarte, intentaré de ti siempre acordarme. Aunque sea un imposible nuestro amor, como quita la esencia de las flores, como quítale al viento la armonía, negar que sufre el alma mía? ¿Cómo borrar de mi alma esta pasión? Al ver que el cruel destino nos condena, mi bien, de que me olvides tengo miedo. Mi corazón me dice ya no puedo, no puedo mis angustias soportar. ¿Cómo borrar el brillo a las estrellas? ¿Cómo impedir que corra el manso río? ¿Cómo negar que sufre el pecho mío? ¿Cómo borrar de mi alma esta pasión? ¿Cómo borrar de mi alma esta pasión?
Thank you. That was lovely. And that had a name. I'm sorry I didn't include that. Prenda de Alma was that name of that piece. So next to poetry. And first to person to read from will be a poet who is, let me actually back this up a little bit again. Claudia Castroluna has long been an advocate of helping give others voice poetically and within Seattle and beyond. And one of the forms of that, she started, actually this is segueing from even what you're about to hear, but when she was state poet laureate, she started this beautiful little tradition, these small poems that are printed and by a young poet. And so we have these over here for you to take. This year's a young Rohingya refugee family from your Rohingya family at Foster High School, a young fellow named Swan Pao, and this poet is bilingually produced, and so please help yourself to that over there afterwards. So now you're going to hear, as I think I said this before, from Claudia Linares, who is a new poet and is going to read a poem. She is a Los Angeles-born Salvadoran who lives here now and is, her parents came to the US during the Civil War, and her work now is as a social worker, a mental health therapist, and community healer. And she offers her gifts for movement work and intergenerational healing in the community. And now she gets to offer us a poem. Claudia, please welcome Claudia.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you all, and I'm so grateful to be able to share this poem with you all. And it is like truly a Cipota dream, right, to be able to be invited into this space and share with y'all our stories and our poems. So as a mental health therapist, as a community healer, a lot of what I write about is about healing work. So this poem speaks of kind of touching the woundedness of oftentimes the generational wounds and finding some of the beauty within that. So this one goes out to my mom and I guess our mother wound, and it's called La hija de Delmi, or Delmi's daughter, which is me. Mi mami always feared el mar, agua too wild, too deep. I could never blame her though. In El Salvador, her boat turned over while out fishing and she almost drowned. A fear of el mar became one of her many traumas. Despite her fear, el mar is where she took us, her children, to heal. Listen, it was never easy for us. There's 3 eager children, 1 scared single mother. I remembered she yelled out from a distance, "Hijos, no se metan tanto." We look back and say, assuring her, "Mommy, it's okay." She let out an exhale and say, "I tengo que confiar en Dios. I need to believe in God." And trusting in a higher power, she let us say, "You see, my mom's trauma was too deep. She did not dare dip her toes in it. So she took us, her children, believing, creyendo en Dios, that healing would come and it would be through her children. So nowadays, a visit to El Mar is a sacred ritual for me. When I arrived to El Mar, Las Aguas, they know that. Soy la hija de Delmi, and I have come here to heal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you. Hope more poems soon. More poems, more ways, and there will be ways. So next, to say part of getting to knowing Claudia Castroluna here in Seattle is to talk about books and poets and people and places, and in a constant kind of going of people known and unknown. And of course, there's people she knows. And one of the people, I can't think of any contemporary of hers she's talked of as closely in spirit and alignment about many things, including Salvadoran background, which is not really just a background, it's a foreground too. It's a life, part of life here. And that is in the person that you're going to hear next, Leticia Hernandez Linares. She is here from San Francisco. She is the author of a book of poems, also from Tiacucha Press, publisher of Claudia's new book, a book that's done so well. The first printing is sold out, and we're awaiting a reprint. So we do not have copies of Mucha Muchacha, Too Much Girl. Her titles are bilingual here. We do have, because that's not the only, she's written that book of poems. She has a marvelous young person's book, a picture book, called, and the computer over there has changed it into Alexandria, but it's Alejandria Fights Back, La Lucha de Alejandria. That's over there. And she has also in book form co-edited a remarkable and powerful book of Salvadoran writing called The Wandering Song, which we have a copy of over there now, but it's regularly at Elliott Bay, and there'll be more again. She herself is an artist and racial justice educator. She teaches in the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University. She's currently artist in residence at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. I think she's also been a writer and a poet in residence at Casa Castroluna Heron on Whidbey Island. I heard about this intense weekend of the two of them just carved out their own time, and nothing was heard from either of them, I'm sure, by the outside world, because they were doing that. So you're going to hear her read from some of her work, and it's not going to be the last you're going to hear from her tonight, because she'll be in conversation with Claudia following Claudia's reading. So with that, please join in giving a good welcome to Leticia Hernandez Linares.
Oh, there's a step here. I feel so tall. Do I look tall? All right. I expect interaction, so you have to engage. I don't do that passive, just like give without getting. So, how you doing? So I like it. Well, this is a very special moment. I actually met Claudia. It feels like you have to say the whole name or something, like she's like a movie star. Claudia Castro Luna in Seattle, in this small, dark little bar where we were celebrating the publication of a bilingual anthology of poetry of Salvadoran poets who live in El Salvador and in the United States. And that was the first of many convenings of writers, of Central American writers. Many of them, almost all of them, are in the Wandering Song. But I think, it was many of first, and I think for three or Salvadoran poets and any other Central American poets who are here tonight, for us to be here together is still a rare occasion. It's still a special occasion. And so that's, this is monumental for both of us. I mean, I feel like it's my book, and I didn't write it, but it's just really important. We're still so invisible, and our stories still really need to be told. And that's that Claudia and I came here a long time ago. Last week, or I was born here, but I came in my mother's belly, so I'm literally ni de aquí ni de allá. So last week I was reading my children's book to a group of newcomers, many of which are from Central America, and their excitement. They were third and fourth graders overhearing references to Central America, to Latin America, to immigrants, to names of their tias and their mamis, and things that Claudia and I never had as little girls. And so that's why it's been so special for us to connect and intersect and fall deeply in love with each other, because we have reflection and understanding in a way that we really haven't had, so it's special. So I'm going to share 3 poems with you tonight. I'm going to work backwards from my most recent poem. Rick mentioned, and thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for everyone who's hosting and who's here. I really love this place, so thank you for having me. I recently created a installation. I do some installation art, and it is a welcoming space that centers the Central American diaspora and immigrants. The way that I grew up in a house where culture was thick and celebrated and beautiful, despite the conflict and the troubles back home. So our vice president, or the vice president, who is the daughter of an immigrant, went to Guatemala and said some really violent 3 little words: do not come. And that had a profound impact on me as someone who not only was impacted by US intervention in El Salvador and Central America, but also someone who teaches Central American history. I'm like, bruh, read a book. Like, what you say, do not come. I'm like, it's your fault, like literally the government that you represent's fault. So that's not really the approach. But because, yeah, I mean, it has to be said, right? But all my life, Salvadoran culture and Salvadorans have been criminalized and, dehumanized. And so I didn't want to cause more harm. So I decided to talk to her, daughter of immigrant to daughter of immigrant. So this is Bienvenida. Salgo a caminar por la cintura cósmica del sur. Piso en la región más vegetal del viento y de la luz. Siento al caminar toda la piel de América en mi piel, y ando en mi sangre un río que libera en mi voz su caudal. Daughter of Shaimala, how many times did they mispronounce your mother into a jumble of letters? Doubt her crimson intonations, her fragrant words. Did Shaimala struggle? Did she crave return? Our mothers both their feet on this blood moon terrain, yours bearing degrees, mine wombful, morning childhood geography. Warm rain pressing her eyelids and palm tree leaves growing over so long, arching, pretending a bridge. a foreign government sucking her under, obscuring the foundation of Mesoamerica's past, crafting game boards for hierarchies of immigrants and you as ambassador. Do not come, daughter of Shaimala, to stand among the ghosts stripped of song, look into the eye of Guatemalan citizens and talk of securing facades and fences that the wind will mock. Volcanic ash in your throat after a 3-syllabled assault, the trees peering at you when you tell the reporters about the example of Shaimala, a seismic silence in the wake of detrimental declarations of unwelcome. Do not say the words. Pluck the blades from your mouth so you don't cut my fingers as I reach for the rabbit that will reason with me, spit up scripted quotes about what your immigrant mother taught you. Have you sat on the floor, your skin and the bare wood with the trickster rock? Have you counted calories to understand a you that is enwrapped in blazers of police cop, chota blue, and the polyester of powerful men? Bring Shaimala's textiles and layer them over the tejidos de todas mis madres y mis abuelas, and we can sing mourning for Claudia Patricia. I will arrange shells and shuffle cards, show you how I fled the monstrous machina, how I grew the crochet of my hair to cover the scars of institution. I am the skin of Las Americas, my leg bearing the birthmark of this tierra, of the sanguinary currents that overflow. I walk and sing along the cosmic waste of this continent, along the line of fire at the belly of the earth. Daughter of Shaimala, scrabble the words of your mother's name and spell her out on this blood moon terrain. The las and the yas are not so different. Daughter of Shaimala, yo soy la hija de Leticia del Carmen, la hija de Soy la Mercedes. And there are no borders to secure except the ones that encage us. There are no borders to secure except the ones that encages. There are no borders. There are no borders except the ones that encage us. Gracias. Wow, this room is big. The applause, I'm really loud. I feel like I'm in a concert hall with the poetry. Are you having a good time? Isn't this so exciting? It's so exciting. All right. I never read from electronic stuff, so this is kind of weird, but I have to, so here we go. So the next piece I'm going to share with you is from the current book that I'm working on of poetry called Vecina. This time I'm not going to translate it, but it is female neighbor or neighbor. I have lived the longest time in my life on the same block in the Mission District of San Francisco. And that's pretty unheard of because that's a whole war in of itself. So there's this whole legacy and journey of displacement that frames my life, my journey, right? From landing in California and not being able to return. And my parents were always headed to San Francisco and then finally ending up in San Francisco myself. And having to really fight to stay there literally. And so I write a lot about that, about the witness, the daily impact, the mental and audio and physical, and I mean, the whole body experience of what gentrification and displacement involves and does. Out of home. A story above, a white man snores, bloated with sleep. Dreams of how he almost rid the walls of a family. Numerous numbered permissions fill piles of typewritten pages, make for a good mattress. And in the REM, he builds loopholes, steadfast to get us out of home. Over 2 weeks, running from insatiable sentences, I spar with the night. I reach the edge of everything. My feet on cracked asphalt, the current its jigsaw, the concrete a whale's back. Skin, sea, and sidewalk merging in the elder, her words a riptide. You are out of home. Across the street at the big top, hombres 3, 4, 5 in and out of the revolving fantasy front door, the tarp, a clown car, but no tires or gasoline because they are out of home. Next door, a white man who doesn't speak to me for decades, chats cheerfully with other white people, peers through my face. My greeting shatters on the ground. His dog chasing my boy and my dog because we are ghosts, because he wishes us out of home. Behind the door, the newest resident scurries like a mouse, like a cautious insect into her apartment. My uncle used to live there. Floor cushions and meditation books, rolling his will to be a better man than his brothers into handmade cigarettes, until layoffs, until he was out of home. Up the street, Lupe, a widow now, no mask covers the grief. She tells me of the last time he walked down the block, never to return. COVID took him and keeps us from touching. So we cry on the corner at a distance. Neighbor for us is welcome, is friend, is vecina, but she and I, endangered species, know we are about to be out of home. In this poem, how do I explain the witness? Detail how memories scatter in the alley. Describe the colors I mix for this image of our teeth whittling from all the ways the day tries us. Our will a violin string someone keeps trying to cut. How every single wall and window fresh for auction. The ground never fully secure, and no promises that we will not find ourselves at any particular moment out of home. In the night, I pretend to trust my pillow, while blankets suspect under, across, and next to me, while people sleep on the street under, across, and next to me, while the unhoused pitch tents in front of empty buildings under, across, and next to me, while brown men, their faces on the bare ground under, across, and next to me, while we are all out of home, out of home. Thank you. It's hard to clap for it, right? But it's, thank you. I'm going to end with a request, a special request from our estrella of the evening, Tragedylandia. People refuse red lights, dismiss cars, and waves of bodies feed a hungry calle. The mission's pulse. Raising eyebrows, viejos consider yesterday's residue, how reluctant the morning rouses to youngsters holding pamphlets, blasting beliefs into bullhorns. Hurry up, save your souls. Between numbered blocks, the hole in the wall tienda is open, shelves skinny like counters wedged between front porches and the street, with just a little bit of a few things in las colonias, back home. On mission, Julio's wall-to-wall knickknacks spray cumbias along the walk to Panchita's restaurant serving of a certain voz, fíjate, way of saying things. Familiar stream of greetings deflated as reporters use up all the words. Tragedia, Centroamérica, noticias, después. News reports count numbers with too many zeros, count bodies, moving land, bodies, broken houses, bodies. Exhumations unveil letters in the cracked earth, spelling out an indignation buried in generations de olvido. Our dead still to be sorted lie under fresh mounds of greed, new building plans piling on top of them. El Salvador's bolero of shaking window, rattling crater, cradles 63,000 plus houses trading for pieces of roof. Little men stand tall, draw up plans using erasers. The earth didn't just move, it went in reverse. Yo vengo de la tierra de tragedia. Yo vengo de la tierra de tragedia. El Salvador no se salvó, el país que hasta Dios olvidó. I sing melancholy verses about a prostrate land eating its own offspring, and suddenly I want to be dramatic. Pull my hair back tight, say the word tragedia. So sexy, so you'll like it and want more. Welcome to Tragedylandia. We've got it all. Massacre, earthquake, hurricane, civil war, massacre again, but the women and children first, please. Earthquake again. In this farce, red paints my lips in a smile so I can laugh and dance for you like the clown El Chocolate, pervert payaso who used to wander my father's vecindad in search of grace and inhibition. but more of a smile now, cry sooner than later clown, not feeling really so sexy. I smear color from my mouth, watch scant news coverage, desperate for outcry about my family's country, my father's ramblings reminding me. Through his rants, phrases falling out like dust you can't sweep away. Salvadorans are like cucas, keep coming back, and we're everywhere. Muchas gracias y felicidades.
Thank you, Leticia, and we can't wait to read those poems, get them in print. But that's not the last you'll hear of Leticia. She'll be up here a little bit later, which lets me say a little about what's about to come the rest of the night besides following Claudia's reading, because I don't think it's going to take me being up here and saying things at that point, because the people you will hear and see are people you have heard and seen. But you will, after Claudia's reading, there's a poem, I believe, that is linked to another piece of music that Gus and Abel will play called Volver, Volver. And so after the reading, there'll be more music. And then Claudia and Leticia will be here in these chairs, carrying on a bit of conversation, which I think will be a fragment of the kind of thing the two of them do. As I say, I think the Whidbey weekend sounded like something, even just the little bits I heard. But two fine poets, and with so much to talk about. And then it'll be time for questions from the audience, which Stesha will be up here by then, and then book signing. And tonight really is a celebration. I mean, although Claudia got a few books last week because the poet or the author usually does, the copies you see over here got here because of an overnight shipment today. So we're extra appreciative that they're here. The other thing I'll just say, because we're all here, we who are here, but we alluded and refer and do say words to those who are watching streaming. And mindful of tonight who's reading and probably who's watching. All three poets you've heard tonight have family in California, Southern California. In Claudia's case, I know there's also family in a few different parts of the Eastern United States and in Europe, and certainly in El Salvador. So because of the ways these things work, people in those places can be watching this now in the moment. And if they aren't catching it in the moment, with the way these are recorded, available. So to all of you who are with us that way, special welcome. So I have some memories. I'm not sure of the first reading of Killing Marias. I'll probably be reminded later of the first reading of Killing Marias, because I was probably there. But the night that really struck me about Claudia's earlier major collection, Killing Marias, was a night where it was at the Rainier Valley Theater, and this book of voices, poetic voices, who were given voice, women who were killed in Juarez, given voice in this extraordinary book that others did the reading from. And I believe Donna Miscolto is one of them who's here. That was powerful. And I actually was switching from heavy to light, mentioned Abel being a subject of an Emmy award-winning documentary. Claudia and I joke a little about this, but because she's an Emmy award-winning poet. That being that that book, Killing Marias, was, I haven't gotten to say this kind of thing publicly either for a couple of years, and it's happened in the last couple of years, was a subject, that book and what it documented in poetic language was enough to send two Seattle Times photojournalists to the border and to get some of those stories. And they both did a print version of that, but also a film, and that received a special Emmy. So in the biography Claudia provided me, she forgot to include the Emmy award-winning part. I will say, because we're about to talk about the new book, that she's also, Killing Marias is a collection published 5 years ago, preceded by an earlier chapbook, This City, which kind of marked her in many ways her arrival here in Seattle as a poet, published by Floating Bridge Publications. She also, as a few of you have seen, and maybe some of you hadn't seen until tonight, and I'm doing this because this poem that unfolds that way, One River, a Thousand Voices, which comes out of her work as a state poet laureate. It's a beautiful unfolding poem which centers the Columbia River. And I thought, well, the copies that are over there are the last few copies in existence of this printing, but apparently there is a new arrived printing, so we will have the revived sources and copies of that. But it's a beautiful, marvelous, the poem and the way the poem is. And anyone that spends time with Claudia knows that how books are printed and the shapes they take are of deep importance, the beauty of all that to her. There's also a book over there, anthology, I want to mention briefly, that came out of what was going on in this country 2 years ago in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And that anthology is of poems and prose, and it's called There's a Revolution Outside My Love, edited by Tracy K. Smith and John Freeman. And Claudia has a beautiful prose piece on Seattle in summer of 2020 in that anthology. That's why that's over there. So now, Sapota Under the Sun, which I'm not going to say, or the sun, the moon. This big orb keeps looking at me. I keep, the moon. It's a big, beautiful moon. Sapota Under the Moon. This book, which really has Claudia's voice in a way that when I talked about Kelly Maria's, there are other voices which clearly come from her as a poet. But in this, she gives voice to herself. And this wide range, there's 4 big sections in this book that cover all manner of her abiding concerns and interests, nature, small and domestic, but also the larger than us natural world, the world of family and closeness, but also the larger and vaster world we live in. And certainly El Salvador. El Salvador, as it's been in her life, in her family's life, as it is in the country now, as is carried on for her, trying to reckon with, as so many who live through traumatic places, traumatic times in other countries, and then find themselves in another land, living in a more or less seemingly peaceful place, but still carrying this within them. These poems beautifully and bravely reckon with that. So I think on that note, Claudia.
I get to stand and feel tall as well. It's quite a moment. Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And to those of you who are out in the world as well watching, thank you. To Rick for that gorgeous introduction and for just spelling out a little bit of my trajectory here in Seattle as a writer. Thank you, Rick, for your heartfelt words. To Seattle Public Library for hosting us this evening. Stesha, Brandon, thank you so much. And the whole team up there doing whatever magic they're doing. To Abel and Gus, we have been together many times in school, doing programs in the schools. And just tonight I thought how wonderful that here we are for this occasion and that you are accompanying me. Thank you. Claudia, that poem was amazing. Thank you for sharing it and for centering us around El Pulgarcito de Latinoamérica, this as El Salvador is called. I don't even know what Pulgarcito is, but what is that translation for? Yeah, it's the littlest country in the Americas, right? So it's called El Pulgarcito de América. A little thumb, yes. Thank you, Raul. Thank you. Thumb, right? Oh, got it. Tom Thumb. Yeah, thank you. Pulgar, el pulgar. from a little country to a big country to a giant diaspora. That is who we are. And as Leticia said in her opening, our stories are still silenced. There's such a small handful of us who get to do this work. And that is why this moment is so significant, really, for me, for Leticia, for Claudia, for all of the Salvadorans and Salvi descent, people of Salvadoran descent in the room. It doesn't happen every day. So thank you. I want to also express my gratitude to those who are no longer with us in bodily form, but who surely have played a hand in making this evening possible. I'm thinking of my abuelas. I'm thinking of my compatriots lost to the Civil War, and to those who perished walking across thirsty deserts, crossing a river. Les agradezco y les digo presente. I want to particularly thank my parents who risked their lives and gave us all they had all those years ago when they left El Salvador and took my sister and myself with them. This book is about that journey. It is that story. So Rick is right that this is really the most personal poetry that I have written. Every book is a constellation of love, as we know, and so much goes into it. So many drafts, for one, but also all the people that make it possible. And this evening, I'm thinking of Tia Chucha Press, of Luis Rodriguez and his wife, Trini Rodriguez. I am just delighted that this book is part of their catalog, and that will sit next to Leticia's book and to Leticia's marvelous anthology of Central American writing. It is really a proud moment for me to have the press carry these words. And I'd also like to thank, because he is here, I would like to thank John Pierce, who edited this book and others of my work. I would say all of the books that are on the table, John has played a hand in, and it's been such an amazing collaboration. John, thank you. Thank you. Finally, I want to acknowledge the most important people in my life, my husband and my children. Sean, thank you so much for having my back and taking care of me every day. And Beba and Lucas are also in the audience, I think all the way back there. Yes, in the dark, as good young people would be. And my oldest, who is tuning in from New York City, where she's going to college. So thank you so much. This is quite a moment to share some of these poems with you all. There are over 4 million Salvadorans in the US. That is people whose records exist. I would wager to say there's many more millions who have no official record, but who also live here. And millions more in the diaspora. The war, which this book talks about, it's my personal story with the way the war impacted my family and forced our exodus, our exile, is the reason why there are so many pupuserias all over the place in the United States, but everywhere where there's a Salvadoran, there is a pupusa store, right? And we have probably the most famous pupuseria owner in the audience, Ana Castro from the Salvadoran Bakery, who runs an enormous store, and it's a community force, and also has a story of war. So in a way, the stories that I'm sharing are the stories that belong to many of us. So it is. I think of it as the teeniest little contribution, because you can imagine this is just my stories, but there's millions of us, and millions of us need to share this story to fill out the fabric of the history that is the history of El Salvador and the history of the United States, because at this point, both of those histories are linked. So I'll start with the first poem in the collection called Agua de Beber. Once there was a girl who lived in a country called Fear. There, her fingers cracked and split into sharp mouths that screamed what she could not scream. Sometimes her hands itched and she scratched them viciously. With the scratching, her pores swelled. At peak moments, they burst, releasing the liquid within. The girl feared many things, but death most of all. Not her own, but that of her parents, through whom she saw and valued the world. That little girl is still around. She lives inside me, sneaking pistachio ice cream whenever she can. Now, when my hands begin to crack and split, I panic and recoil from the pain this causes and from the pain they cause the girl. Long ago, my hands learned to cry in my stead. They carved deltas at the tip of my fingers that took me to ocean. Oh, how deep, how vast the great water, how it sloshes inside my belly. Oh, how beautiful the world to which I belong. There is a series of poems. Rick mentioned this book is divided in 4 sections. The first one really placing us in El Salvador at the time of the war, when I was between 12 and 14 years old, when the fighting was already on the streets and breaking out all the time, and millions of dollars from the United States were being poured in at that time. And then he moves through the journey into the United States. So these opening poems are really centered around my life and the experience with my sister, with whom I lived through armed fights in the middle of the street that could have taken our lives, but didn't. And so I stand here to share the story with you. Syndrome. You and your sister stand at a bus stop with a group of strangers when a truck full of soldiers drives past, all of them holding M16s, all of them ready to kill on command. You and everyone else know that if one person moves the wrong way, everyone goes. It has happened before. You wait for the unleashed bullets, wait for them to tear your flesh, wait for the cry of help that is already seeping from your lips, wait for your last breath. This time, the convoy goes on past, and you and your little sister and your checkered school skirts squeeze onto the next bus that comes along. On the ride home, the city loses power. Armed forces versus guerrillas, handguns versus assault rifles, convictions versus orders. You arrive home in darkness. Your parents have ghosts waiting at the front door. You are alive, but something inside you died back at the bus stop. Your body has no way of metabolizing that kind of fright. It swallows you instead, a barbed lump. Years later, a therapist gives it a name. By then, the lump has burned, has grown. It is a parasite making rancid what once was whole. These are traumatic tales to write and to read, but I have to say, this book, as much as it is about war and loss and displacement, it is also about light and love and the desire to live and to always seek a way forward that we all have inside each of us. Hija de los días. My 14th birthday happened in a November lost to a brackish year. Newspaper headlines from the first 16 days of that month listed the following. On the second day, 10 bodies of unidentified young men were found ditched on the road to Apulo. 2 days later, a man was gunned down and killed in his car in northern San Salvador. The following day, another man succumbed when his furniture store was attacked. On the 7th, in the city of Santa Ana, a 13-year-old boy and 4 adults were attacked and killed. On the 15th, a union leader died of gunshot wounds. The next day, a colonel, his wife, and his children, 11 and 15, were carbonized when incendiary bombs exploded in their house. Pecked days and plucked of hope. My parents did not sing my birthday. They must have felt war's vertigo, the gathering of ashes inside people and things. These days, I pull weeds in my garden, and just as soon, new ones leaf back up. Is that resilience? Happy birthday, Papa. Happy birthday, Mama. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. Thank you. I'll read maybe 2 more poems. Yeah, so this one's titled Cloven Moon. And my last name is Luna, Cloven Moon, a bifurcated moon. And it tells the story when my family arrived in the United States on January 17th, 1981. And at an INS, what is now ICE was called INS then. And at the INS Center in Miami, they fingerprinted us. My sister was too young, but I got fingerprinted. And the INS officer got increasingly upset at the fact that he couldn't quite capture my fingerprints because my hands were shredded to pieces. And the cuts in my fingers were so deep. My hands were so cracked. And the opening poem in the book talks about my hands learned to cry in my stead. And that goes back to PTSD, goes back to my trauma that manifests anytime there is exacerbated stress in my life or in the news cycle. And when we were in El Salvador, the last year we were there, my hands increasingly started cracking and peeling, and I didn't know why. It took me years. I was a graduate student already by the time I figured out there was a correlation between my hands doing this, falling apart, and the trauma of war. So this Cloven Moon takes us back to that first day when we arrived in Florida. The officer in charge of processing my family's entrance to the US stated that from that moment on, my name was to be Claudia Castro. The passport says her name is Claudia Castro Luna, my mother objected. Here, we use only one name, said the officer, and closed the matter with the gavel of his voice. Your moon got taken away from you, said my friend when I recounted the story. But when the officer eclipsed the Luna of my name, the sensation was more like having a limb chopped off. For years, I walked like that, cloven, until pen in hand, I began to weave into blank pages tamales de lote, scent of yerba buena, spells of flor de muerto, the riot of a Tuesday market in Ahuachapan, the Nahuatl sageness of my abuela. I did not know then that weaving like this, warp of memory, weft of daring, had the power to sew back the name chopped off at an INS center on a January morning in 1981. All I know is that one day I walked into a Social Security office, took a number, and waited my turn to expand the canon of last names in this country. I pilgrimaged the Department of Motor Vehicles, registrar's offices, bank teller windows, and once La Luna hung again in the firmament of my name, its light spilled beneath my skin and filtered back into the world from the open mouth of 1,000 pores. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll read two more poems. This one is titled Coquí's Song, and the song has an epitaph, the lines from a song as sung by the Mexican singer Vicente Fernandez. And we have the absolute brilliant luck of having Gus and Abel, who are going to perform this song for us in a minute. So the song is titled Volver. Volver, Volver is the title of the song. The title of the poem is Coquí, Coquí's Song. My cousin Coquí lived allá, sin papeles, in the United States. On the years he managed to return to us, he knew he'd risk his life trying to get back al norte, but homesickness cleaved him with her siren song. He made a party of his first day back, visiting relatives, sharing stories and beers, a silly smile plastered on his round face, the echo of his joy rumbling inside his generous belly, made fuller with foods he did not taste in his life up north. When the beers took hold, he blasted Vicente Fernandez singing Volver and waited for the sun to rise. I watched him once from my bedroom window. He sat cross-legged, a gargoyle perched on the balcony of our house up in the hills of San Salvador, the city sparkling faintly below like a nest of fireflies. Ay, 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 how Coquí flew between what could have been and what was, how he cried, how he sang. A man at the edge of dawn, not an illegal, not a wetback, not a beaner, not beaten, not shamed. A man come home, a man before the rising sun. Thank you. And I will close with a poem that Poetry Northwest actually had in its pages a couple of days ago. And the reason why I will close with that poem is, is because it speaks to this, what the book is about holding this unspeakable moments of inhumanity. And in the middle of that, still knowing that there is light. So this is titled Chubasco. I also leave you with the rain because, hey, we're in Seattle and we're familiar with that. So Chubasco. She returns to her birth country, a wife and a mother, wearing a skirt long enough to hide what is necessary. She hopes that from somewhere, someone calls out, "Here, see this? Isn't this what you're searching for?" She waits with an unfurled hand for the appointed afternoon chubasco. And because today's rain carries traces of yesteryear, she wonders whether she could read the water in past tense. Could she see a slant in the conditional, see in the droplets who and how the person she now is was? Observe who she might have become had she never left, had she never lost. Under her left breast is a window. Come closer. Notice the brambles, the wildflowers, and among them, roses. Thank you so much.
Well, that's beautiful, and what a privilege to hear the poems in the voice of the
creator. I think it's wonderful. Felt. Well, this song has gone for a long time. Vicente Fernandez already passed away, but the song, we know that it'll keep going, right? And it has transcended many people singing it, many feelings. Some people feel it like romantic, some people feel it much more than that. And doing a modest interpretation. But I would say, if somebody talk of interaction, you're welcome to me to do the chorus with me, because I know that you know it. Voy camino a la locura, y aunque todo me tortura, sé perder. Nos dejamos hace tiempo, pero hoy me llegó el momento de perder. Tú tenías mucha razón, le hago caso al corazón, quiero volver. Tú tenías mucha razón, le hago caso al corazón y me muero por volver. Y volver, volver, volver a tus brazos otra vez. Llegaré hasta donde estés, yo sé perder, yo sé perder, quiero volver, volver, volver. Nos llegó ahorita el momento, nos cuidamos hace tiempo, sé perder. Pero me llegó el momento, me llegó el momento de perder. Yo sé, me llegó el momento, pero desde hace tiempo de volver. Tú tenías mucha razón, le hago caso al corazón y me muero por volver. Y volver, volver, volver a tus brazos otra vez. Llegaré hasta donde estés, yo sé perder, yo sé perder, quiero volver, volver, volver. Gracias.
different perspective.
Now we're looking up. Oh,
Yes.
and we're mic'd. Don't really ever need a mic, but I'll be a good girl. How are you feeling?
Good, good.
Let's give another round of applause. I don't know about you, but I felt transported. I was seeing bits of El Salvador I haven't pictured in my mind in a long time. And I can't ever remember hearing those stories from una poeta salvadoreña en inglés here, you know? I mean, and how long we've had to wait in our life for the chance to tell our own stories and to represent ourselves.
Yes.
So
It's
it's
been a
still-
long, it's been
it's
a
been long.
long ass road. Sorry, it's been a long road. Yes, I agree.
So it still feels like it's almost like estamos contando secrets, like our intimate stories that only we know, and I only know hearing, you know, from other people en conversación y, you know, en casa.
Yes, I think that even in casa is hard to talk about the stories because it is so difficult to really place yourself back. And every time you say the story or share it, you're really back there, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, I read that poem about my sister, and I have talked to my sister, and I'm back there with her waiting for that bus to come by. So I think that part of it is also just the dimension of loss and fear and estrangement and exile, all that experience that makes it really hard. The trauma makes it really hard to speak among ourselves. And then there just hasn't been the space, right? That's part of it. And as you say, the other thing also is that we are speaking in English.
Right.
And we have written these poems in English. I mean, that is also, that is quite something.
And the something that it is, sorry? Oh, okay. The something that it is too is the ability to share the nuance of something that when represented by someone outside of our culture can go wrong. Or, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like beat around the bush. It's important for us as hijas de salvadoreños y salvadoreñas to tell our own stories.
Yes, I think that's partly why I love your poem so much. The last poem that you read, because that poem about, tell me the title. I love the title.
Tragedylandia.
Tragedylandia, Disneylandia. Vengan, come over. You know, we have all kinds of tragedy, but it's told with a voice, an insider voice, right? And the tone of the poem and the way it gets to that poem and the turn at the end, which is, you know, we're still here. We're survivors, right? I have a poem. It was interesting to see the use of an animal, in this case, in your poem, because I have a poem that expresses a very similar sentiment with a dog, como aguacatero, los perros aguacateros. So yeah, we're still here. We're still thriving. Not only are we here, we're thriving, right?
And also that, you know, that it's possible to be in solidarity with people and not necessarily understand and experience all the same things, right? I grew up around a lot in the 70s and 80s around a lot of Chicanos and Mexicans. And I mean, definitely we related and connected, but there was also, especially during that time period, a friction and a difference, everything from the conjugation of our verbs to the color of our beings. Like, I don't know why those things matter. It didn't matter to me because I was in the minority, right? So I would eat, you know, I learned, I was taught, you put the flour tortilla on the stove, you put the butter on it. Okay, right on, I love it. And I learned a lot about Mexican culture, and it's a big part of my culture too,
Yes,
right? But at the same time, you know, being able to celebrate and share our distinctive things, our distinctive voceo, our distinctive food, our history, which is so buried even in El Salvador, right? And also needing to hold our allies accountable to, you can be in solidarity with us, but that doesn't mean you become us. And the caricature and the assuming of our culture and our stories and, you know, as one's own is problematic, you know? And so that's all is wrapped up.
Yes, yes,
right?
and there's a flattening when that happens, right? Suddenly you're all the same. That all of that richness that we have individually, our voceo, for instance, that's so particular. It sounds so good. It's like a good pillow. You could rest and luxuriate when you hear somebody addressing you that way, right? It's like you said, we could be allies and still be different. And we should be. We should celebrate those differences and resist the flattening that happens with the push to making everybody the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're not the same, right? Like your story, this is your story to tell. My war was in my house with my teenage Salvadoran immigrant parents struggling in, you know, in this country, right? So we have different stories to tell. It certainly impacted me. The majority of my family was in El Salvador during the war. It impacted us that we couldn't go back. But, you know, so we have bridges and then we have differences. So yeah, it's really
I mean,
important.
one of the things that I actually love so much about the difference in our life stories as Salvadoreños, as Salvadorans in the US, is that you shared with me once that your world, about your imagination, your imagining as a child, your country was a beautiful one. It was the one that your parents shared. El Salvador is beautiful. If you've ever been there, it's a gorgeous place. And so that is the El Salvador that was transmitted to you, right? Just the foods and the celebration and just the warmth of people. Salvadorans are really warm individuals. So here's Leticia with a story of love and this country to which you belong, and you went on vacation. There was an interruption because of the war. And then there's my story of El Salvador, which you just heard some poems about, which is steeped in, you know, really state violence, right? Really terrible stuff. And yet the both of those Salvadors are true. They exist. That is true. That El Salvador is. And to this day it is. That you could find that beauty to this day. And you could find also, sadly, this violence that continues in the country.
Isn't it so funny that we were talking about taking our kids before even having had our kids met and really not knowing each other at all? And we were talking about going to El Salvador with our kids
Yeah,
to go see our other Salvadoran poet friend,
yeah,
Alex.
yeah.
Because that's how familiar you're basically like, oh, you're Salvadoran. We're related. I mean, and we probably are. I mean, Claudia Linares, I mean, oh my God. What are the
Yes.
chances?
Yes.
You pretended, right? That's not your real name? I'm just kidding.
Yes, there is an immediate bond.
Yeah.
Because we're so few. I mean,
Yeah.
in the literary world, I think
That's what we're
certainly
gonna say
that's been.
fierce too, like so few and so fierce.
Yeah, that's also true. We know that. Yeah, because you have to be. You have to be. You have to be fierce. There is no question about
You have
that.
to be ready to get off the plane and change in the car.
Yeah, you do. You do.
TMI, too much information.
You do. You
No,
have to
don't-
be
don't fix
fierce
it.
because we've talked about how I've said, and you've said as much, if I had a role model in my life as a young person with a desire to write, I would be a different writer. I would have started writing long ago. It would be, of course, different. I'm not saying it would have been better, but it
Yeah.
didn't happen
Right.
because I didn't have a role. I didn't have Leticia to look up to,
And I
right?
didn't have Claudia.
You
And it
know?
took us half our life to find each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's part of why the immediate intimacy when you find somebody where there's so few and you're doing this word work, right? I mean, when I was traveling across Washington State, part of the reason why I took on that job, being the laureate, is a huge responsibility. But I thought if I could be a little light to a kid out in Eastern Washington to understand that as an immigrant, you could aspire and become a writer or try something else that is creative, right? That is possible. that's a good thing, right? We need that. We need more role models. And I know that that was definitely something I did not have. I had to find it as an adult and make my way, just as you have talked about, you didn't have a map. You made your way. Now you do. You have a map. You have a geography. We could follow that. We could find ourselves in Leticia's map and find a way.
You know what's so crazy about that is the first map I did find was in the early 90s, Always Running by Luis Rodriguez,
Yeah.
who then later went on to publish my poetry, the anthology that brings all of us together, and now your book.
Mhm.
I literally was so moved by the idea of just sort of like relating to growing up around violence. And in this country and for my family, it was around poverty and gangs, right? And barrios and what that means. But just the way that art, the role that art played in saving his life, and then look at all that he has gone on to do,
Yes.
which is incredibly moving. And the fact that he is the one who has lifted us up as Central Americans and Salvadorans is no coincidence.
Mhm. I remember reading that book exactly. I remember where I was when I read it. I remember the power that it had within me. It's funny that you're mentioning that, because that is one of the reasons why I said I am just so thrilled that this book is under that rubric, under that press, because Luis is somebody who had to make his way, and his story, Always Running, that book is just, should be canon if it's not already. It's an amazing tale, and how we both found inspiration in his words and in his story. Yeah, it's legacy, right? It's a little grain of sand, as I said. What we have written, what you've written, what I've written, we leave it as testimony too, as witness. This is, I think of this book as there are very few, even within El Salvador, very few testimonies, very few first-hand accounts of women and certainly of children of that war. And that is part of my impetus for this book, was to pen and give testimony to having been there,
And you did it
when
beautifully.
it happened, right? Should
wanna
we
read the
read a
poem?
poem?
Mhm,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I know that there might be questions from the audience. We wanted to read a poem that I don't think I'll ever have the pleasure and absolute satisfaction of reading with anyone else but Leticia. So this is super special. And it's the second poem in the book. It's titled Vía Láctea. ¿Vas a leer? ¿Lo empiezas tú en español? ¿Yo lo empiezo yo? Ok. Vía Láctea. Te dejo aquí, bajo la sombra de este mango.
I leave you here in the shade of this mango tree.
Como quien dice, esperando un bus en una esquina o a la orilla de un río. Hablo de una vía que arrastra almas buenas y malas y cosas chulas y rotas.
Imagine you are at a bus stop or standing on a riverbank, watching creatures and their beating hearts ambling by, counting the ways their faces flare up to both sides of the moon.
Te dejo con un par de maracas para que acompañes a los muertos en su procesión y para que animes a los vivos en sus duelos.
You are not alone. I am with you here, naked, holding my baby teeth in a plastic bag, my back against the tree's rough bark, so that I may, alongside you, learn from it how to grow a spine.
Ten cuidado con gatos maleantes. No te metas con doncellas traidoras listas para ofrecerte algún bocado. Fíjate que estoy aquí contigo y desnuda. Bésame, bésame mucho, como te beso yo a ti.
Kiss me deeply, like the earth embraces a tree's roots, like new lovers do when night falls.
Thank you so much. Gracias.
Thank you both so much. This has been, and thank you, Abel and Gus. This has just been such a beautiful evening, and we've gotten such lovely comments from the folks watching online as well. I wanted to share one or two. just so that they know that we see them as well. Moving, brave, powerful, touching, beautiful, bravo. That was from Teresa. And so many clap emojis. And yeah, just quoting the poems back and just picking out their favorite lines. So just, yeah, it's just wonderful that we're able to be here together tonight, but also be in community with people that couldn't be in the room with us. So that's a wonderful thing. We're now able to take questions from both our in-person and our online audiences. And so for folks that might need an index card or a little golf pencil, we have those, and Misha has kindly offered to help get those to you. And if you want to just raise your hand if you need one. And then are there folks that have questions in the audience that have already written them on their cards? Because we can collect those as well. If not, don't feel pressure. Misha will collect them, but I'll start with a question from the online audience. We've got some wonderful questions. And so I'm going to, I think, address both of you with this. I think both of you might have interesting perspectives. From Anne, how do you resist the flattening and homogenization of diverse stories when telling those stories in one language, English? Or are there many Englishes?
¿Quieres responder?
I'll just say I don't think either of us tell the story in just one language. We're always switching back and forth, even in our own conversations and poetry, between English and Spanish and Spanglish, and in a particular mix of how we do it. So I think a flattening is when a people is shown as only one thing, right? Chimamanda talks about that a lot, right? So this is the language we have. It's kind of like in Spanish too. I mean, we can't undo the colonization that is our legacy, right? So when I write in Spanish, yeah, I mean, that's what I got. I got Spanish and I got English and I got the Spanglish in between and the Salvadoran Spanish. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I also think that for me, writing, I mean, I agree with you completely. I think in this book, I didn't even know when I had switched into Spanish. I was writing and suddenly I realized, oh, I switched, because in many ways the poem exists before language, right? So it found the best vehicle for whatever it is I was feeling or thinking. And so it just showed up in Spanish. But I also think that there is, for me, with using English as a decision, we have made a choice, right? We are both capable, eminently capable of writing in both languages. And so for me, it's a choice. It's an armor. I could deploy myself efficiently in this language that is not, my birth language, and I love it. I mean, it's not that just that I'm able to, but that I love it, and I do it with ownership also, right? So not with what you were saying, the imposition, but also that I'm actively taking it up. I'm an agent in that choice of choosing how then I give voice to myself.
I love that choice. Yeah. I mean, I read a book by Salvadoran scholar, La Lengua Salvadoreña, and in it he was talking about that language evolves. So the language is an organic thing. So the language of one moment will not be the language of, another moment. And so, yeah, there are many Englishes and many Spanish.
Yes.
Thank you. I love what you said, Claudia, about the poem existing before language. I love that. We're getting some fantastic questions here from the in-person audience. Leticia, two different people asked about, one person said, why do you sing in your poetry? And another said, I love your integration of song in your poetry. Do you always try to sing in your poetry? So that clearly hit somebody.
Before I knew what Floricanto was, it's just how I grew up. Before I knew the history of Mesoamerican peoples, centering poetry and music and art in all parts of society. My father's a musician, and so I grew up, the first art I knew was singing. So he taught me to sing, and it's just how I am inspired to write, because that's how I learned the history of El Salvador, was through Nuevo Canto and of resistance and of all over the world, because my father listened to all kinds of music, has an extensive vinyl collection that I now own. And that's my herencia, you know, I mean, getting those, my sons and I getting those albums and now having them in our home is just tremendously priceless. And so it's just, I'm a performer, you know, I grew up in dance and in theater. And so for me, poetry is something that you hear, that you sing, that you feel, that you laugh and emote around. And so it just comes kind of naturally. I do riff off of other songs, like that was a Mercedes Sosa song, right? But then the Salvador, I made that myself. So I make my own songs or I sample other songs. And that's just kind of how I do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's another example too of taking ownership of your expression, right? The fact that you also include music, English, Spanish, Spanglish, music, sound, right?
Yeah, and I incorporate songs in Nahuatl, songs in Lukumi, like, yeah, that's just the thing I do. Thank you for that question.
We have a couple questions about writing about trauma. And so I'm going to check in first. Is that okay that we?
Sure,
explore
sure.
that? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So one person asks, says, writing about trauma is hard, 3 exclamation points. So I think that's accurate. And I love that. How do you take care of yourself, the person, in order to allow yourself, the artist, to dig in and express what needs to be shared? And another question adds on to that. And how has writing about trauma been healing for you, if it has?
Yeah. I think my family should answer that question. Not necessarily me, because they're the ones that have to deal with me writing these poems and giving me the love and support. I mean, I have an incredible, loving husband and children who really have grown up watching me be a writer and have understood how that is important and have made space for me, right? At 3 small kids, 3 kids growing up, that's a lot of movement. That's a lot of happening at home, but they have understood and know that as a writer, I'm a quiet writer and need space. So I would say that I have been able to go there because I feel loved and supported at home emotionally. And I think you need that. I mean, that is the question, right? How do you take care of yourself? I think it's also taken me a long, long time. I mean, somebody said to me once, why did you write about Killing Marias is a book of femicide, about femicide on the US-Mexico border. And they said, well, why a Salvadoran writing about, you know, femicide? I was really struck by that question because I cared, because I was incensed that these murders were happening and we didn't know, because I'm a person, that's why I'm writing about this. But I think what they were alluding to was why you have the story of being an immigrant. Why aren't you telling that story? You know? So again, a little bit of this may be flattening or pigeonholing somebody, you know, you're supposed to be telling this story. Why are you telling that? Why are you writing about the Columbia River, you know? No, seriously. And again, because I'm moved by it, I'm deeply moved. It called me to write about it. And so this is why this is how poetry happens. This is how writing happens. But it took me a long time because remembering those memories and reconstructing that time is taxing, is super taxing. And it needed to come when it came, when I was strong enough and I could look back and feel that I could give that a lot of, I think of this book as a way of, like I said, as a testimony. You know, this is a way of not losing, of archiving those stories, because there's such few first person stories. Then I'm also driven by that, what I see as a necessity in the historical record. And so that brings me to the page, you know?
Thank you. Well, We have so many great questions. I wish we had time to ask them all, but I want
we're
to
running
give
out of time.
folks time to get their books signed and all of that. So I'm going to close with one final question for both of you from our lovely friend Carolina at La Sala. And she says, thanks mucho for sharing your corazón. What brings you joy?
Ah. Go, Leticia. Singing. What brings you joy?
You know, the fact that I have you and your beautiful family in my life and welcoming me and treating me like family and having such a large chosen family, I feel very held by a lot of people. And as a single mother, that might, at one point, there was a colonizing voice in my head talking about, oh, this is a broken family. And I was like, oh no, I have redefined family and liberated family. And I have the most amazing family. And I am so grateful for it. And everybody's loved and seen and accepted. And that is pure joy to me.
That's wonderful. Ah. I have to take a moment to absorb that response because it's deeply moving to me. I had a little notebook for Leticia when she landed at the airport today. And it's from Loteria, from, the game Loteria, right? With those iconic images. I come from a town in El Salvador that is the most notorious town for the way that game gets played, because Loteria de Atiquizaya is notorious in El Salvador. because the language deployed is just very saucy, the way people call out the cards. But I told Leticia, one side of the little notebook has a sun, el sol, and the other side has a moon, la luna. And what brings me joy? Leticia is a sun. I am a moon. Even my name says so, Leticia is absolute pure sunshine. And that is an easy question for me to answer in this moment. Having you here, I mean, it's amazing that you're here for this moment to accompany me. But Leticia is also, she just came back from England where she had a reading. She has a show at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Come on, who gets to do that? I mean, that is just amazing. And that we have you here in Seattle. And I don't know, to have your friendship and your sunshine, that brings me joy. That's a great question from Carolina.
I think
Thank
it's
you,
a story.
Catalina.
I think they should make statues of us and knock over some old dead white guys and put us there in our best outfits, with lipstick and earrings, of course.
I'll go for that.
Yeah.
Well, with that, it brings me joy to have you all here tonight. So thank you so much for being here, Claudia, Leticia, Claudia, and Abel and Gus. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody in the audience. Now, I have just a little housekeeping. Elliott Bay Book Company have copies of Claudia and Leticia's books at the table to your right. If you'd like to stay to get a book signed, we're going to move a table right here and we'll just have you line up right across the podium. Sorry. It's okay. If you're heading out, you'll just need to exit through the 4th Avenue lobby because the library is closed. And for folks watching from home, you can find our speakers' books at elliottbaybook.com. And of course, you can find their books at the library as well, spl.org. We're grateful to everybody who made tonight's program possible. Thanks to our musicians and writers. Thanks to our program partners, Elliott Bay Book Company, and our friends at Hedgebrook as well. And thanks to our sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Thanks so much, everybody. Good night, and we'll see you next time.